So this is the last session. After this, we stop speaking, and it's your turn, I promise. So I'm going in a slightly different direction because most of our speakers till now have talked about what we can do and how we can do it. Personally, when I look at what's happening today globally, and Kerala is one more example, the increasing frequency of natural disasters, loss of life and property, political and social instability that follows at the heels of that. But one of the things that we don't look at is after every natural disaster, there is an increasing marginalization, disparity and poverty. This is not really documented, what is happening after the natural disasters for especially people who are very vulnerable. And this, like Sandeep talked about the social capital, this is eroding the social capital, and it is working in the benefit of people who don't really need those benefits. And so, do we know why we have more extreme climate-related disasters? Of course. I mean, everybody in this room knows what is happening. We understand, we are aware, and we also know why we are not doing something about it. So it's not like it's a very complicated science. I mean, okay, some of the calculations and figures and statistics, but it's not complicated. We know the output, we know the process, we know the progression. Do we know how this can be addressed? Somewhere we do know what can be done. And my question is, what is preventing us from addressing this issue? Okay, so what I'm going to focus on basically is this. Why do agencies involved in development make decisions that sabotage the long-term sustainability and the well-being of the collective? Why are we doing that? We know that it is not working. Finally, it comes back to, hitting us all, but we still continue to do it. What is compelling us to go down this road? I'm going to just take a few of the players and look at what is happening in each of these players, because like Prashant said, and Mohan said, and Sandeep said, and K.T. Ravindran said, we are continuing to function in silos. Each department, each agency, each individual functions within a certain set of parameters, which they say, we are doing this. If there's a problem, it's not us. It is with the other. The problem is always with the other. So if you look at the urban local bodies, I'm addressing the urban areas. What is happening? The 74th Amendment, you have the three-tier structure. Kerala has somehow put some things in place, but it is not functioning. The output of decision-making in the urban local bodies is not reflecting in a better urban development in any of our towns or cities. So how is it that if we have a constitutional amendment, we have a legal process, we have had programs, we have had enabling organizations, we have had civil societies, and yet something is not happening in spite of all these efforts? And all of you here are somehow related to the field of development, whether it's designers, architects, planners, but what is it that prevents us from actually making a change? And if you take land use conversion, I mean, you had 2 disasters, you'll have many more because climate change is there to stay. But yet we continue to play around with land use conversion based on the value, commercial value of the land, which is basically a price that we are ready to pay. And this price is based on a unit of transaction which is printed on paper. It is not the cost of what the society pays finally. So who is paying the price and who is incurring the cost? There's a big difference between the two. And the value of what happens to us between the price and the cost is what we sit and discuss, but yet somewhere it does not actually translate into change. And for me, this is something that I don't understand. I've looked at it. Why is change not happening? There are little efforts between what Hunashala is doing and a few things several NGOs are doing, but change is not multiplying. There's no contagion. It is not happening, either in the structure or in the civil society. Life continues as usual. All of you are going to leave the room today. All of you are going to get back into your normal life as it is. You'll remember a few images. You will complain about a few things over the next few weeks. But then we just go back. We just go back to life as usual. What is it? We know, and yet we do it. And if you take, okay, let's take the architect engineer, because that is the demographic of this room. When we work with engineers as architects, it is always a confrontational situation. And this, we mock each other. We say, my design was great. It's an engineer who diluted it, or the engineer does not understand it. While the engineer actually, when they get together, they talk about the architect who just makes 3D and who does not understand anything about structures. And both groups of professionals have to actually work together continuously, but there is no cross-pollination either in the formal education, which is in academia, or in the informal, which is what you learn as you do in your offices. Even architects with 10 years of experience, 98% of them do not understand structures. And which is amazing for me, because you are building, but you don't understand the principles of structure, while the engineer, even after 20 years of practice, doing building after building for the same group of architects, does not even understand the design and the volumes and the proportions of the people that they've been working on for 25 years of projects. And there is really a divide. The Berlin Wall might have come down, but the wall between architects and engineers don't come down. And anything outside this, whether it is dealing with the town planning department, I mean, I'm one of the same group. I don't want to deal with the town planning department for any of our projects. There is somebody called the facilitator. There's a democracy charge. I don't know what it's called in Kerala, but in Tamil Nadu it's called a democracy charge, which is basically a payment is made and the planning permission is given democratically. And the exchange of democracy is against price that is printed on a piece of paper. So it could be called the trickle-down effect, that between the architect, the developer, the credit institution, there's some, other areas that are also economically developing. But the planning department, the building regulations, the development controls, these are things that most architects actually work with as an impediment to the grand designs that they want to make. They do not question it. They do not participate in any of the public consultation forums. I don't know, in Calicut, whenever there's a master planning exercise is done, how many of you actually participate in it? How many of you even know that such exercises are supposed to be done and ask the urban local body to undertake these exercises? So in the end of the day, we keep continuing to do micro-level surgery on few things, saying, okay, if I put solar panels, or I build it rammed earth, or I do this kind of thing, I am making a difference because it's sustainable. But it is as irrelevant as saying, I'm not going to use plastic straws. I know, plastic straws, the poor fish, and the marine sea life. But at the end of the day, unless there's a policy and a structural change, it is not going to make the kind of difference that we need at the pace we need to be there when we need it. So little actions can accumulate and make a difference, but it is not going to make the change that we need in the time we need it. And this is where architects need to move out of our little territory and start to understand the larger mechanism of how development is happening and start getting involved in much more than designs. And let's be frank, our designs are not so fantastic, okay? Magazines in India may be publishing it, we might be giving awards to each other, but actually we are not creating anything fantastic. Between the weather, the climate, and the way we work, and the kind of corruption in the system, and the kind of lack of craftsmanship, and everything, what we are doing is basically finally then covering up with nice expensive interiors and textured finishes, landscaping, and we get on with the next job. With all these agencies involved, each one claims, whether it's a developer or the credit agency or the landowner or the guy who buys the land, the homeowner or the supplier, the transport, the vendors, everybody claims that it is not their fault. They all want to do it differently. But nobody wants to step forward and say, okay, maybe I'm the idiot, let's talk and do something which is a little bit different. What is preventing us from doing this cross-pollination between all the agencies involved in development? I'm asking the question, I don't have the answer, so don't look at me. I hope at the end of this, I get some answers. Because if it does not happen, what is, okay, and this is also not happening. What is happening is the split is getting bigger and bigger as the pace of urbanization is increasing, because people have less time to get involved, and that becomes in itself a good excuse not to tackle the problem. I think, okay. So I think I covered this. So it's basically the four main aspects, in my opinion, between policy, legislation, and governance, then land use planning and development regulations, inclusive development, and then finally urban design, architecture, and appropriate construction. But most of the architects, architectural schools, architectural practices focus on item number 4. And I'm sure most of you sitting in the room were thinking when Katie was talking, what the hell is he talking about? You see? But we can do all the interventions we want in the level 4, but we are not going to go very far if we don't get involved in level 1, 2, and 3. And especially level 3 is the level that you need to go through, where you are including not just within your own profession, your community and your area where you are working in, to be able to understand all the different pressures of land use planning, to be enabled to intelligently intervene in the first level. There's no shortcut to it. Unless you want it, you're not going to learn. And unless you learn, you cannot be heard. Because just going out once in a while and protesting, or once in a while casting your vote, doesn't make a democracy happen. And this is how the democracy in our country works. We intervene as citizens only on 2 levels, casting our vote and protesting. This is not going to make any change. In this situation, you're saying, okay, I'm handing over to this person, and the other one, I'm saying this person is not what I thought he or she would be. And it's not their fault, it is our fault. At this point of time, given the fact that education in this country, primary education, let's forget it, from 1989, 4% of our GDP to 2019, we are down to 1% of our GDP. So primary education in this country has drastically reduced in the last 30 years. But we in this room are the elite who are now have not only had primary, but secondary, but world-class tertiary education. And this is not going to make a difference if there's nothing trickling back in terms of what you can do and where you can do it. So it's nice to talk about post-disaster, what can Kerala do, and I'm really very happy that Abid and the group have put this together, given me once more a platform to rant and rave. But at one point, I would like to know from the people in this room, why? why do we need to come from wherever we come with the carbon miles? I mean, Abid knows how difficult it was to get me to agree to come here, because I really do not think that solutions are going to come from the people in this row. I mean, look at their faces. They don't have the solutions. You have the solutions. You know? No, it's serious, because, I mean, it cannot be. This is not the way to find a solution. If this is the way to find a solution, then we'll be all flying across in all kind of directions. So Kerala, for me, has been the model in terms of social development, equity, education, gender parity. I mean, to the point that I would say, this is the one place in the world that has proven that the conventional thinking that is there globally, that only when you have development up to a certain stage, that you can do a social change. That health, education, and economic development are tied only because economic development comes first. So you invest, you build industries, people get jobs, then they'll spend money, so the market develops, then they'll put it in education. Because there's a demand for education, schools will come. This is a cycle that globally is talked about, but Kerala has proven it is not so. Your economy is at the level as any developing countries, in fact, actually is more depressed. But in terms of social development, you are at par with most of the developed countries. So how is it? How is it that we are standing here and you're sitting there? I really would like to know. So I'm going to the second part of, okay, no, that's not it. So I have distilled down to one slide exactly how we look at any of the projects or developments we do. So there's no big mantra. This is just very simple menu card of what we do, okay? So we look at functional efficiency, because the best way to do less harm is to do less. So many of our clients, when they come to us, we always tell them, do you really need to build that much? Can you give us, let's say, 3, 4, 5 working days so that we take your brief and we take it as a challenge to reduce at least 20% of built-up area without compromising on the functions that they need. And that in itself, 20% reduction of built-up area is actually enough to balance the carbon footprint. You don't have to go for ram dirt, solar panels, this, that, and everything. Because if you build the way people want to build, no matter what you do on as add-on, you are not going to offset the amount you offset by just developing less. And please understand, we have forgotten one of the essentials that allow this country to always be overpopulated. It is the sense of frugality. You know, more than sustainability for me, what I seek is a sense, it's not about denial, but it's a sense of frugality. And this sense of frugality allows for equity in society. And to the point that when I look at, I mean, there's, what's the name of this fellow who made all these Mani Ratnam movies, okay? There are song and dance sequences. A couple of them have the song and dance sequences set in Kerala. You look at the cinematography, the characters, the costumes, the lighting. What he has picked out, which makes them so cinematically powerful, is the frugality of the space, the dress. When they're doing it in Bollywood with all the colors and the costumes and the jewelry and the lighting and the movements and the decoration, which or globally they tell us, oh wow, Bollywood song and dance. But Mani Ratnam's choreographed song and dance, I invite you to go and look at them. There are 4 or 5 of his movies, they have it. The beauty of the frugality that Kerala has, with everybody with their mundu and their dhoti and their simple houses and the kind of features of the furniture, This frugality is being lost. The hotel that I'm staying in, I don't see anything of that frugality of Kerala. I don't see anything of the frugality in terms of the clothing of all of us in this room, nor in the food we ate. Okay, next is intelligent building envelope design. Now this sounds very complicated, but actually it's not. It's a simple geometric exercise. How much volume can you hold with the least surface area? The less your surface area, less material you need, you're already using much less of the environmental stuff, of quarrying, of transport, of transforming, of energy use and everything. Next is climate appropriate. I don't have to say, because geography is going to get at you, but if you don't like geography, too bad, she's going to get at you. Context specific, to reduce operational energy, light, ventilation. Building materials and technology that are low embodied, and if you think about it with just common sense, as Prashant said, which is not so common. I actually say common sense is endangered and soon to be extinct. Low embodied building material often are local building materials which have gone through the least amount of processing. Integrating energy generation. The last points are not so new. Integrating energy generation, rainwater harvesting and management. Decentralized sewage treatment, because centralized sewage treatments is energy intensive, not efficient, and poorly managed, and you're actually sending away your water to somebody else and you're not getting it back. You should hold on to your resources. And last but not least, lifestyle change. Now, I come to the last part where I show you some of the projects we have done, and I'll go through them very quickly, and if the pointer allows. So this is the visitor center, about 33-year-old building, done with compressor blocks. The reason I show you this photo is the flooring in this amphitheater is done with compressor blocks, and they have been there since 33 years. This building sees a traffic of almost minimum 2,000 people a day, because it's the visitor center of Auroville. They walk over it with shoes. So when we continue to do paving, especially in pedestrian areas, with hard materials, high embodied energy, in the excuse that it is more durable, I think we're telling ourselves stories. It's not tested, it's not proven. But by just repeating it ad infinitum, it becomes a truth. But unfortunately, the problem with truth is that truth is not based on being voted by majority. Again, we use as much as possible non-processed materials. So these are kadapa slabs used in staircases, compressor blocks with compression structures for openings and roofing. This is a school where we did the tile roof, which is appropriate to our climate, but as timber is not available in the East Coast, this is a tensile structure using prefabricated RCC beams. The solar kitchen, again in compressor blocks with foundation in compressed earth. And the cooking is happening here using a solar thermal device, a hemispheric bowl with about 11,000 mirrors, and we cook for about 1,000 people in the mealtime. So it produces almost 750 cubic meters of steam an hour. This is another project where here we started to use concrete a bit because it's next to two iconic concrete buildings. We were asked to join it, but as you will see here, the walls, some of them, these are made from waste kadapa. So somewhere between Chennai and Tirupati, there's a Renigunta district. Once passing through there, you kept seeing these hills a little further away. And then consulting the atlas, I realized there are no hills in that area, but the hills were there to see. So after 2 or 3 trips, we were working in the Kadapa district for mapping the primary and secondary education facilities provided by the government. We took a trip off the road. It was hills of Kadapa strips. So the boulders from the mines go to the factories. where they are sliced like bread, and the edges are trimmed off to get a rectilinear shape. It is a rain deficit area which has frequently droughts. So the farmers would lease their lands to the factories to dump these trimmings. Now, unfortunately, what happens is that, of course, once he starts dumping, if there's a good rain, the farmer is not going to say, hey, come take your trimmings and go, because now they're almost 30, 40 meter high mountains. Because first farmer does it, the rain comes, the fine coal dust, which is still sticking to it, starts filtering through the trimmings and runs to the next field, which seals the soil. So he loses his soil fertility. He then gives over his farm. So you actually have a whole belt of farming area in the Rainingutta district, which is just used as dumping for these trimmings. So we've been looking at how we can use it. So now we started doing walls with it, and they're quite good. They're easy to work, and you don't need to paint, you don't need to plaster. They take the rain. So we mix it with rammed earth. There you are. And the base part, which is exposed to the rain or, has high traffic, people putting their hands on it, grime. So actually when you put it in the lower part and people keep moving their hands, it gets a nice patina actually. Instead of like when you whitewash walls or textured walls, it starts to look patchy. Most of the wood in our buildings are all recycled. And I'm sorry to say, but they're recycled from nice old houses of Pondicherry, because the FSI was increased. They take down the nice houses to build ground plus 3, ground plus 4. The Madras roof beams, excellent wood. Where is it, this machine? Here. Okay, now I'm coming to the last part. Here I just want to take the next step to say that all this doesn't need to be exotic. It actually works. So I'm going to take one of our projects. This is a housing cluster that we did. All the walls, we'll go through it. The walls of the building is done with a technique which is called poured earth concrete. So it's a mix of earth, different grading of construction rubble. So we are reusing construction and demolition waste with some sand and cement. The sand is actually M sand, what they call the fine granite gravel. It's mixed in a concrete mixer, poured between forms like you do with concrete, vibrated. After 3 hours, you remove the shuttering and your wall is ready. So in the beginning we were doing compressed earth blocks, then we started doing rammed earth, because between compressed earth blocks and construction, especially in tight urban sites or when you have a timeline to meet, so you dig the soil, you sieve it, you make the bricks, you keep it for 3 weeks and then use it. Not only the process is long, you use a lot of space. So we moved to using more rammed earth, where it's just excavate the soil, and where it's excavated usually is the rainwater harvesting bioswale or your decentralized sewage plant. You ram it and your walls are made. So, the process we removed from 6 steps, we made it into 3 steps. But then we realized one of the issues with rammed earth is it still requires a lot more supervision, because for some reason in this country, we have decided that we are not intelligent enough, that people will not pay attention when they learn something and pay attention to actually do it in the correct way. I have clients who don't want to pay 35 or 40,000 rupees to have a young, well-trained site supervisor who is from the local area with enough skill, but rather employ a passed out civil engineer from one of the local private colleges who stands around in his white shirt and white pant, because in Tamil Nadu they like to wear white, and he knows nothing. He knows nothing. The saving that is made there, they do not realize that saving, and I'm only talking about rupee value, is costing him a lot more, because he doesn't even understand the process of material, construction, technology, and the workmanship. And this is where we found out that rammed earth, when we did the transfer to buildings outside Auroville, often people were not paying attention to the mixing, the compression, and how they put the shuttering up. So we said, okay, let's simplify it further with the same material. With this one of the advantages, we can use the construction demolition waste, which is quite easily available in urban areas. In our area, it's more difficult to get, but in urban areas, you have a lot of construction demolition waste. And this is the walls you get. So you have a set of shuttering. With one set of shuttering, you can do walls 8 feet high, 10 feet high, and you can do 14, 15 feet long in one go. Okay, so the next thing is, of course, everywhere where the wall and the floor meets, or the wall and the ground meets, instead of doing with earth, now that we have this kadapa, waste kadapa strips, we have started using it because they're more impervious, they need less maintenance, and they also give a nice texture. So it's a combination between earth and kadapa then. All the roofing in this housing is made with segmental arches. So it's, you've seen it's ground plus 3. So each floor is built over segmental arches built in a series that makes a vault. And here we use the local fired bricks because of the acoustic issue. Because the local fired brick in our area is, because we have a sandy soil, kind of sandy, 60% sandy granular soil, which is pre-lateritic. When you burn it at low temperature, because there's no timber to burn, there's no coal to burn, they burn at very low temperature. So you get something which is very nice if it was a biscuit, but that's a brick. That's almost 10% wastage just in transport. So these bricks have very poor edges, they have very poor compressive strength, but when it's used as sound dampening and ceilings, they're very, very nice because they actually break up the sound quite well. And in the end, when it's finished, we just do the pointing with stabilizer plaster. Over and above these segmental arch vaulted roof, we have built walls, partition walls, and we fill them up with shredded thermocol. Pondicherry has a huge number of assembling industries. And of course, in Auroville, a lot of us use Amazon and Flipkart, so a lot of thermocol builds up, you know, within packing and the industry. And this is collected in one central place in Auroville, which we call the Eco Service. And we're lucky to have this very finicky, micromanaging Swiss fellow who built a shredding machine that we can regulate in 3 or 4 different sizes of shredding. So using the shredding machine, based on the different uses, we use it at underfloor filling, above the roof for insulation, within the walls, you know, and also we use it in the backfill, because as we're using the soil from the foundation sometimes, part of the backfill also we use it. And for some reason, the termites don't like it too much. So this is what happens after it's filled over, and then we start the next floor. And the end of the day, you have several floors with segmental arches with thermocol as floor filling. All the roof water is collected in the central spaces, and all the surface water is collected in a bioswale. The bioswale part of the experiment is still going on because our funding fell through. We would like to have swales around this project to collect the surface runoff and then have secondary wells so that at least 30 to 35% of the potable water needs that this settlement needs will come from the rainwater. Because our problem is that we get rains within 6 to 8 weeks in the full year, in the October-November period, and then a little bit as the rain shadow of the summer monsoon. So we cannot say we want to have rainwater harvesting structures, because then we would be storing water for 2 to 3 months, but then afterwards these structures, which are built at high cost because they have to be in concrete, would be empty. So one of the ways we found is that instead of having roof runoff held in underground water tanks, is to look at a larger level in terms of development to make sure that our roads and the runoff from the roads are done in such a way with the topography that the non-road, non-vehicle parts can be all segregated, collected in bioswales, and then have secondary wells to use for pumping potable water. Because the idea of recharging the groundwater table, which is what we worked with for 40 years, doesn't work because the electrical subsidy allows the farmer to pump indefinitely. So the input that is going in is nothing compared to the output. But then we realized after undertaking a study that the farmer was a very easy whipping boy, but actually the main water use is all the urban development in and around Pondicherry on the rice fields. And they are using much more water than the farmers were using when it was just rice fields. The internal finishes are very simple. It's IPS and stone flooring, recycled wood for all the openings, and particle boards which are made from industrial waste for all the cupboards. So this is how it looks like. We have part of the roof with solar panels, and we are net positive in terms of energy generation. It's a little cluster of 54 people, and they have moved in August 2018, so it's a little more than a year. And till today, we are net positive. We didn't have to pay for the electricity yet. So, and this is how it is. We're going on with the next phases. So I know that most of us don't like to count, but when you measure, you actually show that you care. So I'm not going to bore you with all the slides here. But I want to show you here, what we have done is we have sensors. Once the people moved in, we put sensors. I'm only taking into account 4 sensors here, but we have about 16 sensors in all the buildings because we're looking at the time lag in building material, we're looking at wind speed, we're looking at sound. So here I'm only going to discuss comfort. Comfort, which means temperature and humidity. So we have 4 sensors here, 2 which are outside to look at the heat island effect, and 2 which are inside, 1 towards the eastern side and 1 towards the western side, because the orientation makes a big difference. So the tables that you see on the sides, this is for the month of June, which is quite hot in Auroville. The temperatures go up to 40 degrees in the daytime, and it does not go below 30, 31 degrees, okay? If you look at it, you have 4 colors. Uncomfortable is a deep orange. Yeah, the yellow ochre is kind of meh, okay? And the light green and dark green is what we're facing. 24 hours a day, 30 days of the month, divided. You see the numbers that are seen in the table the outdoor temperature. You have less than 1, like when it says 0.14, this is the temperature, this is the humidity, okay? So comfort is a correlation between temperature and humidity. And each of the numbers indicate the number of hours in that month where you were within that temperature and that humidity. And to make life easier for all of you in the audience, we put it in a pie chart. And you can see the outdoor temperature. I can't read it from here. So we have about 23% of the month, which was usually in the peak afternoon, where we had outdoor temperature, heat island effect, which was uncomfortable. But by evening, when we looked at it, the temperature had dropped. And one of our main aims was to make sure that between the way the buildings were oriented, the type of building materials, the shape of the building, and the landscape are all correlated, that when the sun sets, how much time you need, not just to cool the inside of the buildings, but also around the buildings. Because this is a major problem that most of us don't realize. More and more people need air conditioning because of the urban heat island effect. Outside is hot, so you're not going to open your windows at 7 in the evening.
Get involved?
Well, I think, first of all, I think all of us have to develop a mindset of an activist. Otherwise, there is no environment. It's nobody's baby, but somebody's expertise. Okay? So when it's just someone's expertise, that person will be marketing his expertise and not getting things done on the ground, nor will it transfer to people. So I think first thing is to make that attitudinal change in ourselves, to believe that if you want to change something, you have to